I refused to train my boss's hand-picked replacement after he passed me over for a promotion. I was threatened with termination. I resigned without hesitation and watched his professional empire crumble piece by piece. I never imagined a simple request for a promotion would end my career, until it did. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel to help us grow and continue our work, and if you enjoy the story, like the video. Now, let's get into it. I'm Ryan. I'm 27, and for 5 years I believed that hard work and loyalty were rewarded. How naive I was. I joined right after graduation in an entry-level analyst role. The salary was enough to pay rent and stop eating instant ramen. My plan was simple: work hard, improve, and move up. The typical American dream. But in practice, I ended up being the guy everyone overloaded with their problems. If a client panicked at 9 p.m., they called me. If a project fell apart 2 days before the deadline, I pulled an all-nighter. Someone needed vacation coverage? There I was, sacrificing my weekends. I believed loyalty was a two-way street. Spoiler, it's not. The saddest part was how normal it all became. Melissa from accounting would send me spreadsheets at 7 p.m. labeled urgent. They never were, but I'd have them fixed before dawn. Dylan from operations treated me like his personal assistant. He'd stop by my desk 3 times a day asking for help with things he should have mastered years ago. Never a please, never a thank you, just the expectation that I'd fix it. And I did. I said yes to everything, thinking that was being a good colleague, believing someone would notice my effort. My boss, Patrick, always told me I was indispensable. "You're essential to making everything run," he'd say. What that actually meant was, "We'll never promote you because we need you exactly where you are." In March, a senior operations manager position opened up. It was practically the same work I was already doing, but with decision-making power and a decent salary. Patrick encouraged me to apply. He guaranteed it was my moment, that I had the perfect profile. He even helped me prepare my application and did mock interviews. I spent 2 weeks fine-tuning every detail and made it through 3 rounds with different directors and the VP. Everything went perfectly. After the last interview, the VP shook my hand and said, "I think you already know how this is going to end," smiling like we shared a secret. I left the building convinced I'd finally achieved what I'd worked so hard for. But they didn't hire me. They hired Chloe. She had only been at the company for 14 months, and I know exactly how she works because I'm the one who trained her from day one. I spent 2 weeks teaching her our systems, processes I created myself, and client relationships I spent years building. She was nice, punctual, and did her tasks, but otherwise she was a mediocre employee. She didn't stand out in any way. Regardless, she got the promotion. Patrick called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, and as soon as I saw his face, I knew. He had that look of fake empathy people use when they're about to give bad news. "I wanted to tell you personally before the announcement," he started, faking concern. "We've decided to give the senior manager position to Chloe. I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but the decision was based on her leadership experience. In her previous job, she led a team, and that gave her an edge with the directors." I stared at him without a word, waiting for him to say there was another opening or something to soften the blow. There wasn't. According to them, the woman who asked for my help 3 times a week just to answer client emails had more leadership experience. It made perfect sense. I didn't want to scream or flip his desk. I just sat there and asked if that was all. Patrick sighed in relief, happy I didn't make a scene, and said I was handling it very professionally, promising more opportunities in the future. I went back to my desk. I stared at the screen for an hour without moving, processing that they had chosen someone I had personally trained. That weekend, I updated my resume, opened job portals, and started planning my exit. If my work wasn't valued there, it would be somewhere else. On Monday, I went back determined to do only the bare minimum. No overtime, no covering for others, no being the department's lifeguard. My goal was simple: clock in, get paid, and look for a new job in my free time. A clean break, no drama, but with the certainty that I'd never let anyone exploit my effort again. The next morning, Patrick appeared at my desk before I even turned on my computer, a sign that something bad was coming. He never arrived before 9 a.m. unless something was about to become my problem. "Got a minute?" he asked, heading straight to the meeting room without waiting for an answer. I followed in silence. He closed the door, sat across from me, and folded his hands on the table as if announcing something major. "Chloe starts her new role on Monday, and we need her up to speed as soon as possible," he said in a rehearsed tone. "No one knows the operations as well as you do, Ryan, so you're the ideal person to train her through the transition." I stayed silent for a few seconds. "You want me to train Chloe?" I said slowly, more as a statement than a question. "Exactly, just for a few weeks," he replied casually. "Teach her the advanced processes, introduce her to key clients, show her the reports, everything you handle daily." Everything I did. The same job for which, according to them, I wasn't qualified enough. I didn't respond. Patrick's face went from confusion to disbelief and then to an expression like he'd just bitten into a lemon. "Sorry, I'm not going to train Chloe," I repeated. He laughed, thinking I was joking. "Come on, don't be like that. I know you're disappointed, but we're still a team. We all need to support each other." "If I wasn't good enough for the position, I'm not good enough to teach someone else how to do it," I replied without raising my voice. The fake smile vanished. "That's not how things work. Supporting team development is part of your responsibilities. You're expected to share your institutional knowledge." "Share institutional knowledge?" I repeated, looking directly at the person who took the promotion that should have been mine, the same person I had already trained once. Patrick sighed and shifted to the patronizing tone he used when he wanted to seem reasonable. "I understand you're upset, but refusing to collaborate will only hurt your future opportunities here. This is the moment to demonstrate leadership by being professional, even when things don't go your way." I almost laughed. "You're talking about a future where I bust my ass for another 5 years just to watch someone else move up." He frowned. "That attitude, that's exactly why the committee had doubts about your readiness for a leadership role." There it was. It wasn't a lack of experience, it was a lack of attitude. In other words, I didn't know how to kiss the right rings or play the office politics. I stood up. "I do my job, I hit my deadlines, and I take care of my clients, but I will not train someone to fill a position I deserved. Find someone else." I walked out before he could respond. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and kept working like nothing happened. An hour later, a meeting appeared on my calendar. Discussion on team collaboration with Patrick and Sandra from HR. I knew what was coming. That afternoon, I walked into the HR office. Both were there with identical expressions of disappointment. Evan, my colleague, was faking making coffee while trying to eavesdrop. He was the kind of guy who microwaved fish and didn't understand why everyone complained. Good guy, but had the memory of a goldfish. "Thanks for coming," Sandra said in a corporate tone. "Patrick told us there's been some resistance to the transition plan." "There's no resistance," I clarified. "I've simply decided not to train Chloe." Sandra looked at Patrick, then back at me. "We understand the promotion decision was disappointing, but refusing to support a colleague is not acceptable behavior." "You know what else isn't acceptable? Leading someone on for 5 years, making them believe they have a shot, only to promote the person they trained. That's what's unacceptable," I replied. Patrick shifted in his chair. "No one misled you, Ryan. You applied, and we selected someone else. That's how business works." "Well, business can also work without me doing anything beyond my job description," I said calmly. Sandra pulled out a printed document with my name in large letters. "Your job description includes knowledge transfer and supporting team development. Refusing a direct order can be considered insubordination." "Insubordination?" I repeated with a slight smile. "Then write it down, because I'm still not doing it." Silence dominated the room. Patrick looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. Sandra clenched her jaw. "We're trying to find a constructive solution," she said cautiously, "but if you insist on not following directives, we'll have to take corrective action." "Do what you have to do," I replied. "I'll keep doing my job, but I'm not doing someone else's." I walked out knowing I'd just put a target on my back, yet I felt free. I was tired of bending over backwards to please people who saw me as a replaceable resource. The rest of the week was tense. Patrick only spoke to me when absolutely necessary. Other colleagues avoided me like I had the plague, and Chloe tried to ask me questions that I politely ignored. "You should ask Patrick," I'd say. "He's your boss now." Sometimes she looked confused or even hurt, but I stood my ground. It wasn't my job, and it wasn't my problem. Patrick chose to promote her without my input. He could handle her training himself. The office atmosphere shifted drastically. Dynamics crumbled. Even Dylan from operations had to start solving his own problems. Everything started falling apart slowly, almost without anyone noticing at first. Then errors began to multiply. Clients started complaining, their tone shifting from surprise to frustration. Suddenly, I wasn't the guy everyone relied on to fix everything anymore. It was as if the invisible support holding the team together had disintegrated overnight. Each day, the environment grew more strained. Melissa, who used to send me all the urgent requests, changed her behavior. Instead of forwarding them to me, she sent them to Chloe, trying to show support for the new manager. At first, I thought it was temporary, but I soon realized it was a strategy. Push me out, make me look expendable. The problem was that Chloe wasn't ready. She had a nice resume and a perfect smile for the directors, but she didn't understand the actual work. Every day she'd come to my desk pale-faced, eyes full of anxiety, holding a blank notebook. She'd ask me to explain procedures I created, workflows I knew by heart, and that she now had to learn from scratch. I just calmly redirected her to Patrick. Watching her confidence crumble was strange. I didn't feel pity or anger, just cold detachment. I had asked for a promotion, not a war. But in that office, the promotion I wanted so badly had turned into a trench. On Thursday afternoon, while I was trying to print some reports, Evan approached me at the printer with a worried look. "Buddy, what's going on? Everyone's saying you refused to train Chloe. Is that true?" "It is," I replied bluntly. He frowned in disbelief. "But why? Isn't that a bit cruel?" "Cruel?" I repeated, holding back a bitter laugh. "They ignored me for the promotion and then asked me to train the person replacing me. Doesn't that seem absurd to you?" Evan was silent for a moment, processing the idea. I watched him connect the dots. "Yeah," he finally said. "When you put it that way, it is unfair. But you could still help her, right? Just to be nice." That's when I remembered why I liked Evan. He wasn't the quickest, but he had a huge heart. However, kindness hadn't gotten me far in this company. "Being nice is what got me into this mess," I said calmly. "I'm done being the nice guy." By Friday, it was total chaos. Chloe had missed 2 deadlines with major clients, sent the wrong financial report to one of our biggest accounts, and completely blanked during a presentation to executives. No one knew what to say. From my desk, I watched the scene with a mix of helplessness and indifference. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had done my part for years, and the only return I got was humiliation, disguised as opportunity. Later, Patrick cornered me in the break room, looking tense with a coffee cup in his hand. "You know Chloe is struggling," he said in that patronizing tone. "Not my problem," I replied while pouring coffee. "When projects fail, it's everyone's problem," he snapped, trying to keep his cool. "Then maybe you should have promoted someone who didn't need constant supervision." His face went red instantly. "Are you being childish?" "I'm being professional," I countered serenely. "I do my job and nothing more." That night on my way home, my phone rang. It was a recruiter who had seen my profile online. He talked about a company with a better environment, higher salary, and most importantly, real growth potential. It sounded too good to be a coincidence. We scheduled an interview for the following week, and that call was the moment I stopped feeling trapped. On Monday, as soon as I got to the office, I received a calendar invite with the subject "Performance Review Meeting." I didn't have to think twice about what it was. They were either going to fire me or try to scare me with a performance improvement plan. Either way, I already knew what I was going to do. I walked into the meeting room with the peace of someone who had already made their decision. I knew they expected me to defend myself, beg for my job, or feel guilty, but I was already mentally gone. My only interest was seeing their faces when I told them I was leaving. The room felt smaller with the four of us there. Patrick and Sandra looked uncomfortable, like they didn't even want to be there. Monica from HR had the hollow expression of someone who had done this 1,000 times. In front of me was a stack of folders, printed sheets, and an air of fake courtesy that reeked of hypocrisy. At that moment, Evan passed by in the hallway and gave me a thumbs up, naively believing it would be a good meeting. I smiled to myself. He had no idea. Monica spoke first. "Ryan, we're here to discuss some concerns regarding your performance and your recent refusal to participate in certain team activities." I had to bite back a laugh. Performance concerns? For 5 years I had received flawless evaluations and praise for my efficiency in solving crises caused by others. And suddenly I had problems. "What kind of concerns exactly?" I asked. Monica flipped through her papers, pretending to look for something important. "We've documented several incidents of lack of cooperation, failure to complete assigned tasks, and an attitude that affects team morale." "By assigned tasks, you mean training Chloe?" I replied without hesitation. Patrick intervened with a forced voice. "Among other things, you've been participating less in collaborative projects. Several colleagues have reported your negative energy." That was the gem of the day. "Negative energy?" I said, smiling. "So now we're doing corporate astrology. The same colleagues who used to overload me are annoyed because I stopped doing their work for free. Surprising." Sandra chimed in with her usual haughty tone. "It's not about extra work, Ryan. It's about being a team player and supporting company goals." "Then clarify one thing for me," I shot back. "What are my goals? Why should I care? As far as I know, I wasn't promoted to manager. My responsibility is to do my job, and I do that with precision, without a single error." Monica looked down, flipping pages, searching for data or proof that never existed. Finally, she said in a rehearsed voice, "We are placing you on a 60-day performance improvement plan. You will need to show concrete progress in collaboration and receptiveness to direction." The famous PIP, the corporate death sentence disguised as salvation. 2 months of observation where any tiny mistake becomes the perfect pretext for a documented firing. That was when I pulled an envelope from my backpack and placed it calmly on the table. "What's this?" Patrick asked. My resignation letter, I said, without missing a beat. The silence that followed was glorious. Monica was speechless, her mouth slightly open. Patrick looked at me like he'd been punched. Sandra was barely breathing, staring at the envelope as if it might explode. "You can't just quit like this," Patrick stammered. "You have to give 2 weeks' notice." "Actually, employment is at will," I responded serenely. "I can leave whenever I want, just like you can fire me whenever you want." Monica tried to regain her composure. "Without formal notice, you'll be marked as ineligible for rehire. Plus, you'll need references." "I don't need anything from this company," I said firmly, standing up. "I already have another job lined up." It wasn't entirely true. I only had an interview scheduled, not a formal offer, but they didn't need to know that. I stood up, took the resignation letter, and placed it right in front of Monica, who was looking at me with a mix of surprise and irritation. "I'm out. Email me the final paperwork." Patrick stood up abruptly as well. "You can't leave like this," he barked in an authoritative tone. "You have active projects. We need time for a transition." I looked at him calmly. "You should have thought about that before putting me on an improvement plan. All my work is documented in the shared folders. Figure it out yourselves." Patrick raised his voice, red with frustration. "This is completely unprofessional." I didn't answer. This wasn't unprofessional. It was survival. I walked out of the room without looking back. I went to my desk and started packing my things. Personal photos, my coffee mug, even the good stapler I brought from home. It took about 10 minutes. The office was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights. Everyone pretended to work but watched my every move. Melissa looked horrified. Dylan actually had the nerve to look at me with pity. Chloe was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in a conference room. Then Evan appeared, looking perplexed. "Are you leaving?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," I replied calmly. "Right now?" "Exactly." His face went from surprise to a kind of confused respect. That was incredible, like in the movies. Hey, do you think I should do that someday?" "Only if you have another job lined up, buddy." "Right, makes sense." He helped me carry a box to my car. I logged out of my computer and left my badge and key card on Patrick's desk. He wasn't there. He was probably still venting in the meeting room. I walked out the door at 11 a.m. on a random Tuesday. Once in the car, I took a deep breath. My phone was vibrating nonstop. A colleague sent a text. "Did you just resign?" I replied with a simple yes. Within seconds, everyone was in shock. It felt perfect. I started the engine, drove home, and for the first time in 5 years, my mind didn't think about work for a single second. What followed was a spectacle worth seeing. Melissa kept me updated. Chloe was drowning in pending tasks. Projects piled up, deadlines were missed, and clients demanded explanations because no one could find the reports. The filing system I had created turned out to be an incomprehensible labyrinth for the others, and the guides I left behind were useless because they never bothered to read them. No one knew how to run the weekly updates I had automated. Relationships with vendors crumbled. They had no contacts or negotiation history. A major client threatened to cancel because Chloe sent the wrong quarterly data. Another demanded a meeting with the directors after delivery tracking went dark for 3 days. Dylan, trying to fix something I used to do in minutes, managed to delete an entire database backup. Patrick tried calling me twice, leaving voicemails asking me to reconsider, organize a transition, or even grab a coffee to chat. I deleted them all. Days later, Monica sent an email requesting an exit interview. I replied, "All company property has been returned. Send any documents requiring a signature via e-sign." 2 weeks later, Melissa wrote to me again. Chloe resigned. "What?" "She quit. Yes, she couldn't take it anymore. She was staying until midnight every day and was still behind. Clients were complaining. Patrick was nonstop pressure. She just walked out without notice. I laughed. So now they had no one, and Patrick was losing his mind. They were trying to split her work between 3 people, and none of them knew where to start. Perfect. Over the next month, the news got better for me and worse for them. The department was falling apart, clients were canceling, employees were resigning, and projects were failing. The directors demanded explanations, but the chaos was irreversible. Meanwhile, I had landed a job at a company that actually valued competence. Watching my old workplace crumble from a distance was an indescribable pleasure, though the best part was yet to come. 3 days after quitting, I was at home relaxing for the first time in years when the phone rang. It was my mother. I let it ring, but I knew she'd persist, so I answered. "What happened?" was the first thing she said, no greeting at all. "Good morning to you too," I replied ironically. "Don't be sarcastic with me. Your brother told me you quit your job. Is it true?" Of course. Brandon, the golden child. 3 years older than me, Dad's pride, Mom's angel. He never did anything wrong. He graduated in finance, a degree my parents paid for in full while I worked part-time to cover my own tuition. He got a job at a company owned by a friend of my dad's. I had to send out over 200 resumes. Every achievement of mine was always overshadowed by his. If I made the honor roll, he was on the dean's list. If I got a scholarship, he didn't need one. When I bought my first car with my savings, Brandon got a newer one as a graduation gift. The comparison was constant and exhausting. "Yes, it's true," I finally told my mother. "And why would you do something so irresponsible? Do you know how hard it is to get a job these days? You can't throw 5 years down the drain just because you didn't get what you wanted." It wasn't about not getting what I wanted. I was passed over and then asked to train my replacement. It's not about a whim, it's about respect. "That's life," she shot back, raising her voice. "Things don't always go the way we expect. You have to endure it, not run away." I heard my father's voice in the background murmuring something until he took the phone. "Listen," he said, in that calm tone he used when he was truly angry. "Your mother and I didn't raise a coward." Coward? What an ironic word coming from someone who spent 35 years in the same government job, convinced that loyalty to a company was a virtue and not a chain. "I'm not a coward," I said firmly. "I left a toxic place." "You left without having another job," he replied with disdain. "That is irresponsible." I had a few interviews scheduled, or at least that's what I wanted my parents to believe. The truth was I had only had a few preliminary talks and one pending call, nothing certain yet. But I didn't want to hear another lecture about stability or missed opportunities. My mother took back control of the conversation like it was a family crisis meeting. "Ryan, you need to call your old company," she said in a tone that mixed concern and authority. "Apologize, explain it was a mistake, there's still time to get your job back." I let out an incredulous, bitter laugh. "Are you joking? They tried to put me on a fake improvement plan just to justify not promoting me. Why on earth would I go back there?" My father intervened with that silent authority he used to end any argument. "Because you have nothing guaranteed, Ryan, and because leaving like that makes you look impulsive and unstable. In this world, appearances are everything. Or do you think other companies won't find out?" His words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. "What do you mean other companies will find out?" I asked, though a part of me already feared the answer. The silence was so thick I could hear the hum of the fridge in the background. Finally, my mother spoke, avoiding a direct answer. Your brother knows people in the industry. He's just trying to help you, dear." "Help how?" I asked, feeling my stomach knot up. Another awkward pause. My father cleared his throat before answering. "He has been contacting some colleagues. He wants to ensure all this doesn't damage your reputation." I froze. "Are you saying Brandon is talking about me to other companies?" My mother replied defensively, almost annoyed. "Don't overreact. He's just networking. It's what brothers do. They support each other. You should be grateful he's worried." I cut the call without another word. I just stared at the phone screen, feeling a mix of rage, betrayal, and helplessness. Brandon was likely telling his own version of events, painting me as an immature employee with attitude problems. I called him immediately. He answered on the third ring, voice relaxed, faking normalcy. "Hey, did Mom call you?" "Yes, and I want to know what you're doing." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. Why are you talking to people about me?" He sighed as if I were a child who understood nothing. "Ryan, I'm trying to help you. I know people in the logistics sector. I'm doing damage control." "Damage control?" I repeated, incredulous. "Yes. Why did you leave a job without notice? It looks terrible. I'm just trying to smooth things over before more doors close." "I don't need you to manipulate anything. Stay out of my career." "Someone needs to be the adult here," he replied with that arrogant tone he always used to feel superior. "You're acting emotionally without thinking of the consequences." "I don't need your protection," I spat through gritted teeth. "I just need you to stop meddling in my life." "It becomes my problem when you make the family look bad," he countered. "Mom and I are going to have to explain to all our friends why our son resigned like a spoiled teenager." That's when I understood everything. It wasn't about me or my future. It was about how my decisions affected their image and reputation. "Stop talking about me to your contacts," I said, my voice sharp. "Stop using my name in your conversations. Do whatever you want, but don't come crying to us when no one hires you because you burned all your bridges." I hung up, blocked his number, and then blocked my parents. I wanted silence, even temporary. I thought that would be the end of the family drama. But 2 days later, an email changed everything. It came from an anonymous Gmail account. Subject, "You should see this." Inside was a forwarded email chain between Brandon and a vice president at my old company, Michael, the same one who had interviewed me and ultimately chose Chloe for the promotion. I read each message with growing disbelief. The emails were from weeks before I even resigned. Brandon was asking about my performance, if I showed signs of stress or attitude problems. Michael was diplomatic at first, but Brandon insisted with his tone of fake concern, saying he was worried about my well-being. Finally, Michael gave in, talked about the promotion process, explained they'd chose someone else, and said I hadn't reacted well to the news. He even mentioned that I resisted training my replacement. And then came the words that made me sick. Michael wrote, "It sounds like Ryan has always had issues with authority. Maybe he needs a bit of discipline to mature." I stood up so fast I almost knocked over my chair. I ran to the bathroom and leaned over the toilet. There was nothing in my stomach, but the dry heaving wouldn't stop. When the shaking passed, I slumped onto the cold floor, staring at the ceiling, trying to comprehend how my own family could do this to me. I saved the emails in an encrypted folder and, without a second thought, called a lawyer. Daniel, a labor law specialist with an excellent reputation, met me the next day at his office. He was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a gaze that inspired confidence. He reviewed the emails carefully. After a few minutes, he smiled with a mix of surprise and satisfaction. "This is very serious," he said, turning the screen toward me. "For them, not for you." "Can I sue?" I asked, breathless. "Absolutely. The company violated anti-retaliation laws, and your brother's intervention demonstrates coordination, which severely worsens their position. He accepted my case on a contingency fee basis. I wouldn't have to pay a dime unless we won. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was regaining some control. While Daniel prepared the lawsuit, I kept trying to rebuild my professional life. I applied for several positions, polished a new resume, and went on interviews. One of them seemed truly promising, a large logistics company with a good reputation and competitive salaries. A recruiter named Raquel contacted me directly. Her tone was cordial and professional. She said my experience was exactly what they needed. The phone interview flowed naturally, and weeks of frustration began to dissipate. At the end, she said, "Ryan, I think you'd be an excellent candidate. I'm going to schedule an in-person interview with the department head." The meeting was the following Wednesday. I arrived in a sharp suit with a well-organized portfolio. There were 3 people in the room, including the area director. Everything went flawlessly. Technical questions, leadership examples, even some laughs at the end. When it was over, the boss gave me a sincere smile. "We just need to confirm your references. I think you'd be a perfect fit for our team. We'll be in touch before the weekend." I left the building with my heart racing. I walked down the sidewalk with a feeling I hadn't felt in months. Hope. But on Friday afternoon, when the phone rang and I saw Raquel's number, something in my stomach tightened. "Hello, Ryan," she said, her tone much colder than before. "We need to talk about something that came up during your reference check." "What happened?" I asked, feeling the adrenaline spike. "We contacted your former company, and the feedback was not favorable." "What did they say exactly?" I hesitated. "They mentioned you had performance issues, that you refused to follow instructions, and that you walked out without notice right after being placed on an improvement plan." I lost my breath. "That is completely false. I resigned because they were retaliating against me." "Retaliating?" "Yes, exactly. I'm currently suing them for wrongful termination and labor retaliation." The silence on the other end was long and heavy. Finally, Raquel spoke in a low voice. "I understand, but having an open legal case against a previous employer represents a risk for us. I'm sorry, but we won't be moving forward with your candidacy." I tried to explain, begged her to verify the facts herself and not rely on slander, but her response was polite and final. "I wish you the best, Ryan, truly." The call ended, and I stared at the screen. I felt a mix of rage and despair. They hadn't just stolen an opportunity from me, they had destroyed my reputation. The next 2 interviews went the same way. Everything would go great until the reference stage. Then came the silence, the rejection emails, and the vague excuses about concerns regarding my attitude and professionalism. It was obvious. My name was blacklisted. The most painful part was knowing the first blow came from my own blood. I started to feel like I was being hunted. Every door that seemed to open slammed shut at the last second. My savings were dwindling, rent was due, and despite my persistence, no one would hire me. After the 3rd rejection, I called Daniel to tell him what was happening. His response was immediate and firm. "That's illegal, Ryan. No company can lie during a reference check. This only strengthens our case. Send me everything you have." That same night, I received another anonymous email. The subject read, "More proof." Inside was another message chain, this time between HR and Brandon, dated after I had already resigned and hired Daniel. Brandon was still coordinating with them, planning how to fight my lawsuit, and even worse, discussing how to falsify low performance reports to justify their actions. In one message, the VP suggested they should protect the industry by warning other companies about me. Brandon agreed and promised to spread the word through his network. I called Daniel immediately, even though it was late. After seeing everything, he said in a tense voice, "This is a conspiracy, defamation, and tortious interference with your professional life. They are finished." He added, "Brandon is an active participant. This is completely actionable." The following Monday, Daniel filed an amendment to the lawsuit, including Brandon as a named defendant. By Tuesday, my old company's lawyers were already calling, trying to reach a settlement. Daniel flatly refused. On Wednesday, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mother using a different phone since I had blocked hers. Her voice sounded furious. "You sued your own brother? If you go through with this, you are dead to this family." I didn't respond. She had made her position very clear. A week later, Samantha and Michael, two former employees of the company, contacted Daniel. Both had gone through situations similar to mine. Samantha worked there for 7 years until she questioned a director's order that seemed illegal. She went to HR for guidance, but 2 months later she was put on a PIP and fired shortly after. She tried to find work for 6 months, but in every interview, recruiters hinted at concerns about her judgment. Michael, for his part, had reported workplace safety irregularities. He was fired 3 weeks later for attendance issues, even though his records were perfect. Since then, no one would hire him. A recruiter eventually told him in confidence that his former employer had flagged him as confrontational and high risk. "This is a pattern," Daniel said seriously, "exactly what we needed." Both joined the lawsuit. It was no longer just about me. It was about a widespread system of retaliation. The discovery process began. Daniel subpoenaed all emails and records. The company resisted, but the judge ordered them to comply. Meanwhile, my parents started calling other family members, telling their distorted version of the story. Many relatives took their side. I received messages accusing me of being vindictive and ruining Brandon's life. The only person I was willing to listen to was my cousin Natalie. We met at a coffee shop. "Your father has done this before," she confessed, stirring her coffee. "Sabotaging people. I mean, remember when I applied for that training program after high school?" I nodded vaguely. "Your father called the coordinator and told them I wasn't reliable. It was all a lie, but it closed the door for me. Do you know why? Because Brandon had applied too. And of course, your father didn't want any competition. Brandon got in, and I ended up working in a retail store for 3 years. I felt a knot in my stomach. I had no idea that had happened. I only found out because the coordinator told my mom much later. Your father has always protected Brandon at the expense of everyone else. 3 weeks later, boxes of requested documents arrived. Thousands of printed pages. What we found was devastating. A literal list titled "Do Not Rehire" with codes next to each name. My name appeared with the tag "Litigious, Alert Others." Samantha and Michael were there too, all cataloged as problematic, but the worst was yet to come. The emails showed that HR maintained constant communication with other major companies in the sector, exchanging information about conflictive employees, a literal employment blacklist. Daniel called me that night. "This is much bigger than we imagined. We're going after the whole network." "Can we do that?" I asked. "We can try. It'll be complicated." "I don't care," I replied. "They destroyed entire careers." When the magnitude of the case went public, my parents lost it. They tried to contact me from various numbers. When I didn't answer, they showed up at my door. They banged insistently until I opened it. My father pushed his way in. "Stop this right now." "Get out of my house," I ordered. "Not until you listen," he replied. "You are ruining your brother's life." I stared at him and replied calmly. "Brandon ruined his own life when he helped my old boss take me down." "He was only protecting the family's reputation," he shouted without a hint of remorse.
When my mother added coldly, "You're being so ungrateful," I felt something inside me break. I told them to leave, but my father stepped forward with that tone of authority I no longer recognized. "Drop the lawsuit or you are dead to us," he warned. "I already am," I replied without hesitating. A heavy silence fell. I told them again to get out of my apartment. My father held my gaze for a moment, but seeing no doubt in my eyes, he turned and walked out. My mother followed without a word. I closed the door and locked it. That was the last contact I ever had with them. Months later, the legal process was in full swing. My old company, desperate to contain the media exposure, offered a settlement, a substantial amount of money, a neutral professional reference, and a mutual non-disparagement clause. Daniel brought me the proposal. "From a legal standpoint, it's a good offer," he explained. "But if your goal is real change, accepting this won't achieve it."
I thought of Natalie, Samantha, Michael, and everyone else who had been crushed by the same machine. And if we go to trial? We would force them to testify under oath, and the records would become public. Even if we don't get all the damages, the exposure would destroy their reputation. But there are risks. They have expensive lawyers, and juries are unpredictable. I looked at him firmly. "Rejected. We're going to trial." Daniel smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." We rejected the first offer, then a larger one. We rejected that too. Soon, more people began to come forward, former employees from different companies, all with stories similar to mine. We discovered the blacklist system spanned at least a dozen major corporations. Daniel gathered the evidence and built a solid case showing systematic coordination to punish those who stood up for their labor rights. The local press picked up the story immediately, accusing major firms of operating an illegal professional blockade. My old company panicked. Others began to cave. Some offered public apologies. Others quietly changed their policies. But my old firm, along with Brandon, decided to fight. So we went to trial. Daniel presented every piece of evidence with surgical precision. Emails, logs, lists, and testimonies from Samantha and Michael. It formed an undeniable pattern. The defense tried to discredit us, painting us as resentful ex-employees. Then came the key moment, Brandon's testimony. Seeing him tremble in court was almost cathartic. Daniel dismantled him piece by piece, displaying the emails where Brandon suggested strategies to document fake performance issues and coordinated with the VP to tarnish reputations. The breaking point was an email dated 2 days after my promotion request. Even before they rejected me, Brandon was already communicating with the VP, positioning himself as a concerned family member. The timeline proved the whole thing was a planned sabotage. He had no answer. The jury saw it as clearly as we did. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days and returned a verdict. Guilty of wrongful termination, retaliation, defamation. The jury came later. The verdict went public and the news went viral. My old company never recovered. Its reputation was destroyed. In less than a year, they filed bankruptcy. The VP resigned in disgrace. Patrick was fired. Brandon lost everything. His own company forced him out, and no one would hire him again. My parents never apologized. They simply cut all contact. Natalie told me they were telling people I was mentally unstable. I didn't care. I had rebuilt my life. I had a better job, stability, and the settlement allowed me to pay off my debts and create an emergency fund. But the most important thing was regaining something they never gave me, self-respect. Many told me I should have left the past behind, that holding on to resentment wasn't healthy. But those people were never betrayed by their own family, nor did they see their careers destroyed from the inside. I chose to fight, and I won, not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been silenced. 2 years after the verdict, I still get messages from people who suffered under the same system, thanking me for exposing it. Knowing they got their careers back makes it all worth it. A few months ago, I ran into Evan by chance at a coffee shop. He was still in logistics, but at a different company. "Ryan," he said, surprised, "I heard everything that happened. It was crazy." He ordered a coffee with 7 different modifications, and then asked me with an innocent smile, "In the end, did you ever actually train Chloe?"
I couldn't help but laugh. "No, Evan, I never did." "Ah, so it makes sense why it all fell apart then," he replied seriously. "Probably," I said. He nodded wisely, paused, and asked, "Are you still mad at all of them?" "At some of them, yes." "Makes sense," he said. "I would be too if I understood what they did to you." We said our goodbyes. I watched him leave and realized he was right. I wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. Despite the pain of losing my family and all the exhaustion, I was at peace. I had learned not to confuse loyalty with submission, nor sacrifice with respect. My parents still don't talk to me. The last I heard, they were saying Brandon was the victim and that I ruined him out of spite. Let them think what they want. The court documents tell a different story. Natalie mentioned recently that Brandon is working a basic job in another state, completely blackballed from the logistics sector. The irony made me smile. Patrick ended up at a smaller company in a lower position. According to Melissa, he aged a decade in just 1 year. Karma has its own pace. As for Chloe, I heard she left the industry entirely. She couldn't handle the scrutiny once it was revealed how she got the promotion. It turns out Patrick was trying to get with her. That smile the VP gave me during my last interview confirmed everything. The whole thing was a sham disguised as merit. The case files made it clear. They didn't pass me over for a lack of leadership. They passed me over because Patrick manipulated the directors while sabotaging me behind my back, obsessed with a woman who didn't even want him. Samantha and Michael used their settlement to found a logistics consultancy. They offered to make me a partner, but I decided not to go back to that world. I needed distance, silence, and an environment where people don't measure others' value by how much they can exploit them. Over time, I moved to a different city. It wasn't an impulsive decision, but a way to start from scratch without the shadows of the past. I found a smaller company with an honest team, where respect isn't a favor, it's the norm. My current boss, a sensible guy, values results over appearances. For the first time in a long time, I feel like my work has a real purpose.
I invested part of the settlement money. The rest I used to clear my debts and help a few former colleagues who, like me, had been marginalized by that system. Today, I have stability, but more importantly, I have peace. Every now and then, someone from the past writes to me, some to congratulate me, others just out of curiosity. Sometimes they mention Brandon, Patrick, or even Chloe. They say their lives were never the same, that the industry doesn't look at them the same way. I don't rejoice in their downfall, but it comforts me to know that consequences finally reached those who acted without ethics. My parents still haven't reached out, and though a part of me still grieves, I've understood that some losses are liberating. I don't need them to believe me, forgive me, or love me out of obligation. I've learned that family can also be composed of those who respect you, not just those who share your last name. Sometimes I wake up early, make coffee, and look over the old legal emails, not out of nostalgia, but to remind myself that I survived. Everything they destroyed, I rebuilt with my own hands. Above all, I realize that dignity is non-negotiable. Today, I walk without fear. Reddit comment of the day. You discover that it is possible to rise again even after going through extremely difficult times. You learn that dignity, self-respect, and self-care are priceless and worth much more than any toxic family bond or job that tries to diminish you. Today, you can walk with serenity, stability, and pride in everything you achieved through effort and dedication, knowing that your value doesn't depend on anyone's approval. Every challenge you faced made you stronger and more aware that no one has the right to diminish or destroy your journey. You learn to choose healthy relationships, preserve your peace, and surround yourself with people who truly lift you up instead of pulling you down. Above all, you discover that the freedom to build your own story at your own pace and with your own hands is an achievement that no adversity can erase. If you watched this far, like the video and subscribe to the channel. See ya!